All right, we got audio now. Looks like we got audio. I completely forgot to even put my damn mic on before we got started. I got everything else set up, but I forgot to put my mic on. So, you can't win them all, but we got pretty close. We do have some stuff to do tonight, but we're going to get the feeding out of the way first. So let's get that done. And I've also got some stuff to talk about tonight. So we're going to have a busy evening. We're going to actually do stuff, and we're actually going to talk about fish stuff tonight. Probably talk about other things. I don't have 3 hours worth of fish stuff to talk about or whatever, but I do have some fish stuff to talk about, so that should make some of you happy. Robert, hello, Zini, Dade, and whoever else is with us. I'll check up on messages here in a second. I haven't even finished fully putting my mic on yet. All right. I got a good music for you tonight, too, if anybody wants to try to play the music game. I know we don't do that very much anymore, but I also don't often listen to anything that's worth doing a music game about tonight. But I was listening to a fun one tonight. Although I don't know if it's fun, but it'll be fun to see if anybody can guess it. All right, let's get started having a puff of my weed here. This is just a regular old bowl full of weed with some hash oil on top, as per usual. That was a weak ass hit. Damn, hardly even counted. Let me do that again. That's a little more like it. Mike. All right, let's also throw some floating pellets in there for the larger fish, the koi in particular. This koi are really starting to get big. I think by next summer we're going to have to figure out something to do. I think another year of them growing like this, and they're going to be getting a little bit large for this tank. I might get 2 more summers out of them, but we'll see. Mel, didn't even see you hiding in there. Let me get back to the beginning here and see if I missed anybody. Switch over to all messages first. All right, Zini, Dade, Mel, Robert, Mike, and that looks like everybody. All right, and hello to all of those of you out there lurking. I know you're out there. Well, Arknight's not here, so let's just go ahead and get started without him, and we're going to move right on to the next tank, because we are going to be working on this pond here soon. That is an OG Original. I don't know. It's the brand name is OG Original. It's like a gold color. That's not the original hitter piece that came with it. I bought that myself. Got a little, you can see it's got the impressions in there to keep the ice cubes from falling all the way down. So it does have an ice catcher. I don't usually use it. I do sometimes, but not very often. Garnish. Happy a Sunday indeed. All right, let's move on to the next tank. And I'm not going to turn the pond light out. Actually, I will turn it out. I can always just turn it back on when we start working on it, but it'll reduce the glare on some of the other tanks while we make our way around the room. And that pothos in there is just that pothos I threw in there from the other day. It's not necessarily going to live in the tank, but I needed to do something with it, and so that's where it went. All right, I also bought some new nicotine. I got 55% nicotine. So this pack's a wallop compared to the other stuff I was hitting on, and I'm already used to this. And I don't even get the head rush I used to get. It took like a day to get used to the nicotine again. And so now I'm hitting on 55% nicotine, and it's still not doing it for me. 5 months. All right, Mel, you have fun. Well, Cornish, you could either say you have 2 less tanks that you had than before, or you could say you now have 2 tanks available to do something else with. Zany, 10 months. Laura, you made it. Someone was just asking about you. Yeah, I thought Zany had been a member for years now. Well, the biggest fish in that tank now is just the common fantail goldfish, the calico one you see in the center of your tank. That one is now bigger than Wednesday, which is the black one you can now see sort of through the grunge in the center of the tank. She was always my biggest goldfish, and now that little fantail that I got the size of a marble, it was about an inch long when I got it, has already outgrown the Oranda, which is the big black one. So the calico is just a fantail. It's not the Oranda. If you notice, its head is a little more pointy than the other ones. And so that one might get up to 10 inches eventually. Although I would imagine if that thing was 10 inches long, it would be the size of a basketball. Hope it doesn't get 10 inches. Oh, blue panda? That sounds awesome. Yeah, when I pointed the camera at the tank, I was going to say this is the Zany special. I escaped this one out to look like Zany's tank. You can only see in it if you look straight down. All right, let's keep rolling right along here tonight. I would say, sadly, I don't have any mushroom juice or anything to take tonight, but that's only because I took it all last night. I had a wallop of a night last night. I took 12, I ate 12 pieces of chocolate. It was a little rough in the beginning, but it was wound up being a hell of a night. I can't really have a whole lot of other stuff in that tank with the goldfish. So, I mean, I could probably put like a pleco or something in there that would help clean the glass, but I couldn't do any snails. I think the goldfish would try to eat the snails, even if they were larger, like a mystery snail or something. I still think the goldfish would bother them. So, I don't know. Maybe I can get a rubber lip pleco or something and put it in that tank. I hadn't even thought about that. That's not a bad idea. Sports ball. Chris. Yeah, I I ate 3 pieces of the chocolate and then drank the last of my syrup on Friday night. And then that left me 12 pieces of chocolate last night. And so I ate 6 of them at about, I don't know, 9 o'clock or something. It was pretty late when I started. And after about an hour, I decided I wanted more. But at the same time, if I ate more, I only had 6 pieces left. So if I ate 3 of them, that would only leave me 3, which what the fuck, what is 3 going to do? So fuck it. I just ate all 12 of them. And I figured it would also force me to not have any tonight. And that would, basically force me to take a day off. I've been drinking that stuff like pretty much every day for the last week or two. It's getting expensive. So I did eat 12 pieces of that chocolate last night. Again, there was a couple of minutes there in the beginning where I was beginning to wonder if maybe I've made a mistake. But then I chided myself for such thinking. Of course, I didn't make a mistake. I just had to get through that initial onset, which again, with certain kind of drugs, that onset can be a little unpleasant for a few minutes. And then after about 20 minutes or so, it sort of smoothed out. And again, I just had a great night. I didn't go to bed till 5:30 this morning. I didn't even go upstairs until 3:30 in the morning. All right, I got to keep feeding the fish. Let me do a hit, and then I'll take the algae wafers over there real quick. I'm almost a full week into my mushroom flowering, or fruiting, if you want to call it that, flushing, whatever they call it. And I'm still not seeing anything noticeable, but I am looking through a grimy bag with a bunch of condensation all over it. And the initial onset of the little pins are tiny. So if I really opened it up and looked in there, I might see something by now, but I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just going to leave it alone until I see like mushrooms growing in there. And that should be in the next few days. I should start to see, definite shapes of mushrooms beginning to develop. And then it should go fast once they start. About a week, and then they'll be done. All right, where the hell did I put? No, there it is. So if you remember last week, Friday night, I talked about doing some work to prop up the island in my pond. I still was not able to find the thing I was looking for in order to do that, but I did find something suitable. Big heavy gauge PVC pipe, and it's black. And I cut it to what I think is going to be the right length, but I don't know about that yet. We'll have to get in there and start tinkering with it and see how it works. And I think while I'm in there, I'm going to maybe muck it out a little bit, scrape some of the crud out, maybe take a little bit of the weight off, let the water flow more freely. Although I do like the way it's kind of creating its own water courses and sort of meandering around as the muck and grime and stuff builds up in different areas. It's interesting to watch how dirt just gets created, or mud and soil just get created before my very eyes. I haven't been adding soil to my island, but it's just covered in stuff now because of just gunk and biofilm, and shit just builds up, and it's ultimately that's the mud at the bottom of a pond, and it just gets deeper and deeper. So we will have to get in and muck out a little bit of that, I think. The main concern, of course, is just getting that prop underneath of there so it doesn't collapse on me one day. When I had cribs and they bred, I didn't notice any hiding in the mouth kind of activity, but they did. They were very attentive parents. The father sort of escorted the little school of fry around, and if any of the fry like started to drift away, he would go out and kind of herd them back in and corral them, and he kept them in a really neat group to prevent them from getting gobbled up by anybody else. And then, of course, the female was on guard and she was chasing the other fish away while the dad was, corralling everybody. It was really interesting to watch how what good parents they were as far as fish go. I was really surprised by that, but they terrorized my tank. Pond puppies. I want to talk about tonight. My topic I want to talk about is gas exchange and air stones and that sort of thing. And I also want to talk about unfiltered aquariums. And I also want to talk about, I'm going to give you a teaser here. I want to talk about the trap of falling into, or I should say, I want to talk about the dangers of falling into the father fish trap. And I want to make sure I don't fall into the father fish trap. So if you want to know what the fuck I'm talking about, you'll just have to wait. I thought Beano helped with the prevention of gas. Prevention of gas exchange. I feel like I have a phantom skull cap on. I just took it off, but I can still feel it on my head, even though it's not there anymore. No, Zini, you're not. First of all, to fall into the father fish trap, you have to be a long-time fish keeper par excellence like myself, or father fish. So I'll get to it. I'll explain. But I don't feel like talking while I'm walking around doing stuff. I'm going to sit down and chat when we're done talking. I mean, when we're done working. But we got to get everybody fed first. So we're going to crank through that. Want everybody done by 20 of. I thought about just feeding everybody before I even got started, but I assume everybody wants to at least have a little bit of look at each one of the tanks as we go around the room. It'd be kind of a bummer to just start out with me sitting in front of the camera and go from there. That's usually when half the audience leaves anyway. So let's not start with everybody leaving. Thank you, Dade. Smoke a doobie. Steve. Can't wait for you to try this 55% Nick I got. I want to see what it's like for you to hit it out of my little device versus your heavier duty one. I'm honestly not super crazy about this 5.5% or 55% stuff. The other stuff I got, the vanilla flavor, is 48%. And I got this not because it was stronger, but I was just tired of puffing on that vanilla constantly. I just wanted a different flavor. And I was at the gas station the other day, and I just smelled this most delicious strawberry smell. I was like, oh, man, what is that? And I looked over, and the person at the pump next to me, upwind, was puffing on a vape, and it must have been some strawberry kiwi flavor or something. And so that afternoon, I went out to the vape shop, and I bought some strawberry stuff. And when I said, what's the strongest stuff you've got? He's like, we got this 55%. I was like, yes, please. And so we found a strawberry one. I think this is strawberry watermelon apple, I think. And it's all right, but I like the effect that the other stuff gives me better. It's a different brand, and it feels different. I don't know. It's weird. I like it, but I like the other stuff better. All right, Chris, we will see you when you bounce back. All right, and let's move to the next tank before I fall over. This one's a Zini starter kit. And we're just sticking with the crisps tonight. Thinking it's about time we saw some more babies swimming around in this tank too. So keep your eyes peeled to see if you notice any little tiny fish swimming around in there. Yeah, I was thinking that, Steve. I actually have my sub-ohm tank. I was looking at it yesterday and I was thinking, do I want to do that? I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I think that would be way bit much trying to hit off one of my sub-ohm tanks. From what I read, if you're going to hit off of like a sub-ohm and you want like big clouds, that's when you're supposed to use the freebase nicotine. It's a little rougher on the throat, but it's a much, much lower percentage. So you can do those really massive clouds off those sub-ohm devices without blowing your brain out or blowing your heart up with nicotine. The Nic salts are for the little pod devices and little cartridges and stuff like that, like I'm using. So if we put this stuff in a sub-ohm, it would just, oh my God, just one hit of it would probably make you sick, or again, give you a heart attack or something. Because remember, nicotine will kill you. You can't just take unlimited amounts of nicotine. It does have potential lethal consequences if you take too much of it. Of course, caffeine's the same way, but you got to take a lot of caffeine before you get to that point. Fish traffic. Gamer. I said it was a starter tank. I didn't say it was the full Zini special. Knocked on the door to the point of caffeine. All right, let me get a drink of my iced tea, and then we will move on to the next tank. I don't see any little tiny fish swimming around in there, do you? All right, let's move this on. And we'll stick with the crisps here. Frappe overdose, nice. I don't know. I've had way too much caffeine before, and I wasn't even close to the danger zone, and it was awful. Heart racing, pounding, hands all jittery and shaky, all fucking anxious, and like it's sweaty, and it's bad when you get way too much caffeine in you. Five pots of coffee. I don't drink like that. I drink about a half a gallon of coffee or less a day. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of excess caffeine. I do drink coffee a lot, but I nurse mugs, all throughout the day. I don't like drink a cup of coffee. My mug of coffee lasts me for, a couple of hours before I'm on the next one. So I'm getting little steady doses of caffeine all day. I might drink it a little bit faster in the morning and then slow down as the day progresses. But now that I've been hitting on the nicotine, I haven't been hitting on the caffeine nearly as much as the nicotine. I haven't been smoking as much weed either now that I'm puffing on this nicotine. So I guess there's that. And I did look into whether nicotine was carcinogenic or how it affected you and if it was like caffeine or not. It actually doesn't affect you the same way as caffeine. Completely different mechanisms within your body. It gives you the same sort of overall effect, but it's acting on you completely differently. And as far as the carcinogenic stuff, all I could get was that some international organization considers nicotine to be probably carcinogenic to humans. And after reading all about what it was saying, at the end, it talked about how, well, with cigarettes, it's kind of hard to tell because there's so many other carcinogenic items in there. We don't really know how carcinogenic, if it even is carcinogenic, nicotine is, because so they didn't test nicotine, they tested cigarettes. That's not a fucking test of nicotine if you're testing it with benzene and everything else in it. Of course it's cancer causing. So the best they could come up with is they think it's likely that if they think it's likely, I'd probably do shit that's carcinogenic every goddamn day. The food I eat, the shit I breathe, the pesticides we get exposed to. I'm not going to worry about puffing on a little bit of nicotine. You only drink it black. I'll spare my comment there. I used to abuse the shit out of that stuff when I was young and a truck driver. I would drink so much coffee, and then I would take those, I don't know if it's ephedrine or ephedrine, but there were the little white pills you used to be able to get at gas stations and stuff. I don't think they sell it anymore because it's fucking dangerous shit. Really bad for you. And God, I used to take so much of that. I would take up to 20 of those ephedrine a day while chugging coffee to wash it down. It's no wonder I was an asshole when I lived in Florida. I was really fucking aggressive, and I was just a dick when I lived in Florida, but it's because I was all jacked up on fucking stimulants all the time. I'd stay up drinking till 2 a.m, and then I'd have to get back up at work at 5 a.m. because I was a milkman, or some days I'd have to be at work at 5 a.m. And so I'd wake up still drunk, and then I would just start eating the fucking ephedrine and drinking the coffee to get through my morning and get through my day. TK, how are you? You grew up on sheep herders coffee? I don't even know what that is. Sports car clips. My age, I am 53. Actually, I'm almost 54. I'll be 54 in December. Damn, that's coming up fast, isn't it? It says, why is your age? I read that as what is your age? I didn't even see you wrote, why is your age? Why is my age? It's because of when I was born. All right, moving on to the next tank. Hang on, let me adjust that camera a little bit. This tank, you can't really see into it with all the glare. I got to kind of get the camera up and then angle down with the light on, and then you can sort of see into the tank without so much glare on it. I'm a professional. How did I get into this hobby? I have always loved fish and outdoors and fishing, and I've always been fascinated by fish tanks, but I always thought it was like too complicated. I didn't understand like how to manage a fish tank. I was always afraid they'd die. And then one day my wife brought home a little tiny tank that had a couple of guppies in it, and I fell in love, and we didn't have any problem keeping a little tank with some guppies in it. And I realized like, hey, this isn't so hard. I can do this. And I started keeping fish once I discovered the nitrogen cycle and actually began to understand how an aquarium worked. My love for the hobby exploded at that point, and that's why I have a whole room full of fish. I got fish tanks upstairs, etc. I wouldn't say I'm burning out on the hobby at this point. I think I'm more burning out on YouTube than I am the hobby, but the hobby's still not as fascinating as it used to be. I feel like I've explored as much as I need to and well beyond what I need to for my fish keeping. I don't know. It's something I do now. It's kind of like it's just part of my basement. It's not like this thing I look forward to coming home to work on my fish. I'm not always thinking about new fish to get anymore. I was just talking to Zini this afternoon. I haven't actually been to a fish store in probably, I don't want to say before the pandemic. It couldn't have been that fucking long, but it's been at least 3 or 4 years since I've been to a fish store. No, I haven't taken those things that I was talking about since the early '90s. That was long, long ago in my past that I used to do drugs like that, for work purposes and whatnot. That wasn't for enjoyment. That was to get through my day. Now I just do drugs for enjoyment. I love drugs. When I was young, well, overall, I've been a truck driver. I was a truck driver when I was younger. I started out delivering auto parts in a pickup truck. I got my tractor trailer's license when I was 21. I moved to Florida where I didn't drive a tractor trailer. I actually drove a straight truck, but it was a refrigerated truck. I was a milkman. Delivered dairy products, milk and dairy products to hospitals, prisons, nursing homes, schools, one or two convenience stores, but it was mostly institutions that I delivered to. I've hauled all kind of shit and delivered but mostly it was just truck driving stuff. After that, I was a massage therapist for a little while. And by then, my alcoholism was so bad that I couldn't really hold a job anymore. And so I started doing my own thing, working for myself. And now I just kind of do the hustle culture. I got a lot of different sources of income. My main source of income is spraying deer repellent. I do have a little deer repellent company where I spray people's, lawn, landscape plants, gardens, and stuff like that with deer repellent. And that's my main source of income at this point. I, at one point, was on the brink of having YouTube be my source of income, and then that all fucking carpet got pulled out from under me and all went to hell. So now I'm back to being a broke ass bitch with a lot of debt. All right, this is my other Zini starter tank. I do have the best happy endings, especially if you're one of my OnlyFans. They get the happiest endings. I have surpassed you. This tank sucks. Yeah, YouTube is acting weird. They're doing all kind of stuff with how they determine whether you're an adult. They're doing all kind of weird stuff with their moderation. They're using AI to do a bunch of stuff, which of course is going to work out well, as it always does. So I can tell you, if you're somebody, whether you're an adult or not, if you watch a lot of stuff that YouTube thinks is young people watch, it's going to give you problems if you try to watch a video that's like an adult, or an 18 plus video or something like that, or certain subjects, certain topics, content, stuff like that. They'll tell you, we've decided, we think you're young and you can't watch this, based on the videos you watch. So if you're a gamer and you watch a lot of like gaming stuff or whatever, they may restrict what videos you can watch because they'll assume you're a child. Which, how in this day and age anybody assumes that because somebody's a gamer they're a child is just beyond me. When I was young, the idea that like video games were for kids, that was a fairly common. It was a game, kids play games, adults do serious things. We live in a different world where like you can be an adult and still be a gamer, and that's perfectly normal. So the idea that YouTube's going to assume you're a child simply because you watch gaming videos just seems kind of weird to me. But I've heard a couple of people complaining about that now, that they've been blocked from certain videos just based on their watch history. Yeah, people connected to a non-existent organization. That's some scary stuff that's about to go down that I don't want to even think about right now. So let's not. All right, let's move on to the next tank. All right, I don't know if my betta fish is even still alive in here. He didn't come out when I fed yesterday, and I never did see him anywhere, and so I don't see him now. He's not in his little cave. I don't see him up near the surface anywhere. I wonder if he's like stuck to the filter intake or something, because he's going to be dead soon. I'm pretty sure he's on his way out based on the way he's been swimming around the last few days in the tank. And I do not see him. Well, if he's in there, he's hiding really good. And if he's dead and tucked under a rock or something, that's no big deal. He'll just father fish away in the tank. Yeah, I don't see him in there anywhere. I wonder if he's already... Oh, there he is. He's way up in the back corner. Can you see my hand? Yeah, he's way up in this corner in the back. So I'm going to disturb him and see if he doesn't swim around a little bit. So what he's been doing is when the food's out, he will come out if I encourage him, but then he doesn't go to the food. It's like he tries to go to it, but then he like swims in these really fast, jerky motions and just like swims right past where the food is. And now it doesn't even look like he's going to come out for that. Let's see, what is he doing? Is he stuck in the corner? Did he shoot out from there? Felt like he wiggled out. Oh, there he is. He's right up in the front of the tank now. See how he's not really going to the food? He's just swimming around in these fast motions, and then he goes right back down to the bottom and just lays down somewhere. He went right back into his cave. He didn't even get any food. So that doesn't seem too good to me. But I've had him for a few years now, at least 2. And betta fish generally don't live very long. So 2 years out of a betta is not too bad. Let me see. Looks like Kendra has joined us. Where's Kendra? Where's my last stop sign? There it is. All right. Kendra! Chemically sterilize a fish? I've never heard of I've never heard of sterilizing a fish with any kind of chemicals or anything. That's a new one on me. All right, I am all caught up. I've said hello to my dear Kendra. How are the girls, by the way? I know they don't really watch my videos anymore because they're very adult videos, but you can still tell them I said hello, thinking about them, hoping they're doing well, as I'm also, of course, hoping you are doing well. You can tell the difference between my actual hits and my nicotine puffs. The good news is, though, that I do have 2 bottles of mushroom syrup that are arriving in the mail tomorrow. So that's good. I only had to go 1 day without it. And I ordered some THC vape juice as well. And I think that will be here sometime this week. It should be. It's shipped. and it's only coming from California, so I don't see how it could take more than a few days, a week at the best. All right, that should be enough for everybody. There's more meat in this tank than you realize. I got a chunky catfish in the bottom. I got some plecos in the bottom. Siamese algae eater swimming around that eats food as well, plus all the discus and the rainbow fish. So I got a lot of stuff in there to feed. Are you talking about the sterilizing the fish, Kendra, being a clickbait headline? I'm not sure what you're talking about there. Again, I've never heard of being able to chemically sterilize a fish, but that doesn't mean it's not a thing. It's just I've never heard of it. I've never had any reason to have heard of it. But I mean, I do a lot of reading about fish and whatnot as I'm doing my different researches, and I've never come across anything that talked about being able to chemically sterilize a fish. Well, that's what sisters are for, isn't it? Oh, we're with your dad till Friday. Nice. Give you a little bit of relief, a little bit of breathing room. I'm also going to throw a couple of algae wafers in this tank down at the middle section for the catfish in there. If I throw the vibrobites in there, I don't worry about it. But with the flake food, a lot of that gets eaten before it even gets to the bottom. So I just want to make sure I'm putting something in there that'll get down to the cave where the catfish lives. And that is dropped right in his front door. All right, we'll give this tank a few more minutes to feed, and then we're going to start working on the pond. Don't forget, we are going to talk about filterless tanks. We're going to talk about gas exchange. And we're going to talk about the dangers of falling into the fatherfish trap that I decided was a thing today. And since I decided it was a thing, it is. All right, and while we wait, I think I'm going to do an actual bong hit. Of the marijuana. All right, Zany, if you pass out, have a good sleep. All right, did 2 bong hits. All right, let's get to work on this stupid tank. Put my stuff down here. Turn you around here. All right, so this table you can see down, or this massive plants and stuff you can see down here, is sitting on a plastic table, and it is sagging in the middle, and it's getting heavier and heavier. And I'm afraid one day I'm going to come down here, and that whole thing is going to be in the pond. And so what I want to do is prop another, like a 5th leg under the front edge of that, And I couldn't find the actual legs that came with it, so I cut this piece of PVC, and I think I cut it the right length. I just kind of eyeballed it, and so we're going to see if I can actually wedge that under there and use it to prop this up. I'm going to make sure I put the smoother side down. Actually, let me hit this with a little bit of sandpaper to soften those edges. It's going to be sitting right on the plastic liner on the bottom, and I don't want anything even approaching a sharp edge anywhere near that. That's obviously a file, not sandpaper. Good enough. Story of my life. All right. Let's see what we can do here. I need to put it under there and then sort of lift and slide the foot into position, but all these rocks are down here, so that's going to make it challenging. Oh, that was fucking easy. All right. And it is even kind of wedged up against a little piece of plastic, so it's going to stay very secure. We'll put these rocks back around the base of it, and we're done. Well, that was a lot less work than I thought it was going to be. But we can get in here and do some grunge removal. Let me get a trash can to slop this crap in once I scoop it out of there. All right, so let's see what we got in here. I scooped a bunch of crap out of here the other day. Oh, well, didn't scoop it out, but we washed it down. All right. See what I'm talking about? That's a lot of mud. Mud. Handfuls of this crap in here. Piles of it. Yeesh. All right, what can we get out of this side? Oh, wow. We got a lot out of this side. Probably taking a couple of pounds of weight off of this already. It's kind of tough because a lot of the muck has roots in it from all the plants I got up there. And so when I'm pulling the muck out, I'm like pulling roots along with it. I'm trying to leave the roots behind, but I'm basically unrooting all of the plants. I'm pulling all their dirt out. There we go. That was a big old chunk. Got a plant with it, but that's all right. Just a little water sprite. We can pull the muck off, leave the roots on, and just slop it back in there somewhere, and it'll grow. It'll be fine. All right. It's probably going to be time to do a filtering on this tank again. All right. Give you a quick walk around, close up look once I get the camera out of here. Get my hands dried off. Another ninja. How the hell are you? 42 months. Damn. It's the ultimate number of months. All right. So before we had water coming all the way back here and flowing and dripping off its back edge. Now it's doing what it's kind of supposed to and just sort of flowing down there. You can still see that all that's just mud. That's probably 6 inches deep of mud right there. It goes all the way down to the table. All of that, you see how that's all just still mud. So we got a dragon's tongue is still growing in there. The species of spiderwort is still doing well. There's some of it. Here's more of it growing over here. Of course, the pothos plant is just, you know, monstrous every damn where. This piece is supposed to be over this way, except I don't want it in the pond. I want it out of the pond. And you can really see how I opened up in here. It's just, I literally emptied that of mud. It's a big hole that goes all the way down to the rocks. And then you can see how the water is just flowing in now. I put that on there basically just to cover up the plastic hose so it doesn't look so plastic hosey. And then this rock also causes me to get a little bit of water coming over this edge, which keeps all of this moss and everything over here watered. At least it was when it was splashy. It's not so splashy anymore now that I've cleaned it out. But it is flowing a lot nicer. And this is all duckweed growing up here. Bunch of muck in here. Much better. All right. Let us commence with copping a squat. I had a gym teacher that always said that. Bob! All right, everybody, cop a squat. What the fuck was his name? Mr. Lentz. That's what his name was. Can't believe I remember that. All right, once again, let's turn the pond light back off. And I'm going to come sit down, make sure I got all my stuff, get my light turned on. All right, tablet, nicotine, bowl, lighter, weed, bong, ashtray, drink. I think we're good. I don't know why I thought that installing that foot under there, that fifth leg under there was going to be a job or something. That took, what, 8 seconds? 15 seconds and we were done. It took longer to clean the muck out of the tank than it did the put the leg under there. All right, that's good enough. All righty, let me see where I was. There it was. Cyanide fishing? That's you ever seen the movie Creature from the Black Lagoon? And they go around, they're trying to catch the creature eventually once they figure out there's a creature in the lagoon. That's what they do. They take that white powder and they throw that powder all in the water, and all you see all the fish and everything. That's exactly what that is. That's a cyanide fishing technique. It stuns the fish or paralyzes them, and they float to the surface, and you can just collect them up. So that's a thing. I didn't know. I thought you were talking about chemically sterilizing them. Thank you, Dade. What's wrong with mud? Mud makes the world go round. I do not know there. I'm sorry. I don't remember that. There's so many things I don't remember. I get a lot of information from a lot of people, but I do not remember you mentioning that before. Oh, no. Is she okay? Yeah, poor Zini's going to be sad that he missed you, Bob. Shirley. All right, I am all caught up. I can use the stop sign I already got there. So we are good to go. The reason and one thing I wanted to talk about, I guess we'll start with talking about the filterless tanks. And then let's not. Let's start talking about gas exchange, because my thoughts about getting caught in the father fish trap came from my thoughts about the filterless aquarium, which came from a problem with my wife's tank upstairs this morning. So we'll put all that off to the side for a minute, and we'll just talk about simple gas exchange, because that is what kept the tank alive when the filter in her tank stopped working some time ago. And of course, she never noticed or anything. She just looks at the fish and feeds them every day. I'm the one that does all the tank maintenance and everything. And it's in her room, not mine. So I seldom go in there. Occasionally, if the door's open, I'd look in when I walk past. And if the tank looks all grungy or something, I'll do a water change and get it all cleaned up or something. But I don't go in on a daily basis and look in the tank. So if the filter isn't running or something, I don't know that. She had a heater break in at one time, and there was no heater in that tank. Fish started dying. It was in the wintertime. We kept that room closed up, and the heat duct turned off, closed in that room, because we don't go in there very often. And the temperature in the room got down really low. It was in the 60s, and fish started dying. And I figured out that the heater's not working. And, so stuff like that happens from time to time. And today, when I looked in there, as I walked past, I noticed the water seemed really still. It was just a really calm tank. And so I went in and I lifted the filter, and sure, it's just bone dry. It's a standard hang on the back. I think the impeller got jammed up on a little piece of grit or something that might have got sucked up in there, and it was not running so long that it dried up, and even the water that was in the reservoir in the back area was almost evaporated away. It was almost gone. So it's been days since that filter was running, but the tank was fine. Everybody was fine. The water looked great. No issues. The only reason I noticed was because I physically saw it and saw that the water wasn't rippling or moving. And, that's what alarmed me. But I do have an air stone in that tank, and that's what kept that tank alive. Between the way I've got the tank set up, which we'll get to, and the fact that there's an air stone in there, I think the tank probably still would have been fine without the air stone. Honestly, it's only a 20-gallon tank. But the fish probably, with no circulation, the fish probably would have been spending a lot of time in the upper portions of the tank, because you will get gas exchange even in a stagnant body of water. But the further you get away from the surface, the less exchange is happening. If there's nothing moving that water around, the exchange just kind of happens right there, and it just sort of stays right there. So the fish can usually still get a fair amount of oxygen. It's a planted tank, so there's plenty of oxygen being produced by the plants during the day. Anyway, the air stone in there was the surefire way that tank survived without having that filter running, and that's because of the gas exchange and the circulation in this case. But again, we'll get to that, because that's got more to do with the self-sustaining filterless tank that we're going to talk about in a minute. with the gas exchange, I didn't want to really talk about anything specific necessarily, but I just want to reiterate this again. I've said this a million times over the years. My regular viewers are going to get tired of hearing me say this at some point, but I just want to remind everybody that an air stone does not add oxygen to your aquarium. If it adds oxygen to your aquarium, then you have to assume it's adding CO2 to your aquarium, because there's CO2 in the atmosphere as well, correct? So if you're blowing bubbles in there that are putting oxygen in the tank, isn't it also putting CO2 in the tank and dissolving extra nitrogen into the tank? Because, you know, that's what air is made out of. And the answer is no, because it's not putting those things in the tank. It's making them available for the tank, but it's not putting them in the tank. What I mean by that is, if you think about the way a tank is injected with CO2, there's a tank of CO2 that is forcing excess amounts of CO2 in the tank. You're putting CO2 into that tank. If you wanted to put oxygen into the tank, you'd have to get an oxygen tank and put oxygen into the water. Now, there's only a certain amount of oxygen that will be held in the water before it starts to precipitate out, whereas carbon dioxide will just build up and build up and build up, and the water will simply become more and more acidic. When CO2 dissolves into water, it becomes carbonic acid, and you can simply add as much CO2 to that and make it as acidic as you want it. Whereas with oxygen, the water has a certain amount of oxygen it can hold, and once you get to that saturation point, it will precipitate out of the tank. That's what pearling is. Pearling is not an indication of how much CO2 you have in your tank. You don't need excess CO2 to get pearling. What you need is oxygen saturation. Once the water is saturated with oxygen, as those leaves are producing the oxygen, it has nowhere to go. It's not dissolving into the water because the water's saturated, and so the bubbles just begin to build up on the surface of the leaves. That's oxygen saturation. It's got nothing to do with how much CO2 you have in the tank. Now, generally, people will say, well, you need that much CO2 to get the plants to grow that fast, etc. And that may be true, but the bubbles are coming from oxygen saturation. So with an air stone, your tank has a balance it wants to find between what's dissolved into the water and what is in the atmosphere. And again, when you're adding CO2, you're forcing extra CO2 into the tank. If you've just letting the tank breathe, it's going to have a much, much lower level of CO2 that's going to be proportionate with what's in the air. And so the air stones facilitate that. They allow for that free movement of gas either way. If there's excess CO2 in the tank, the air stone will bleed some of that out. If there's too little oxygen in the tank, the air stone makes the oxygen available so that it can absorb into the tank. But you're not putting the oxygen into the tank. You're simply making it available, and then that way the tank can just breathe naturally. And having that is good. You want that gas exchange. You want as much gas exchange as possible. If you've got a process in your tank that's using up a lot of oxygen, let's say you put some medicine in the tank and the medicine is oxidizing stuff in the tank, that's using up oxygen out of the water really quickly. A normal amount of flow and circulation might be fine under regular circumstances, but if you've got this sudden increased level of oxidation happening, it's pulling oxygen out of the water much more rapidly than normal, and just water circulation may not be enough movement to facilitate the amount of gas exchange that is needed to get more oxygen in the water. The air stone will make that available, so if more oxygen is needed, the tank can pull it out of the air. It's kind of like the difference between opening a window versus turning on an air conditioner. An air conditioner is positively adding air to the room, whereas just opening a window is now facilitating the movement of air in and out of the room, depending on internal versus external pressure and how the air needs to move, etc. It's a passive process, whereas the air conditioner is a forced mechanical process. So remember, your air stone is not that forced mechanical process. It's just like opening the window. It's allowing the tank to breathe the way it wants to breathe. If it needs more oxygen, it can get it. If it's got too much CO2, it can get rid of it. If you don't have the air stone, that CO2 may build up, or that low oxygen level may never come up to where it needs to be. That air stone allows that to happen. So that's my thoughts on the air stone, is it's not adding oxygen to the tank. I hear people say that all the time. Oh, if you put an air stone in there, you'll add more oxygen to the tank. Technically, more oxygen will be in the tank possibly, but it's not the same. Again, this may be pedantic and I'm splitting hairs here, but I think it's important to have a functional understanding of how it's actually working. If you're going to be setting up a tank, especially if you're going to be setting up a tank that's a more sophisticated type tank, which is what we're going to start talking about in just a moment. That'll be our next topic. Are you a Nigerian prince? Janice, basic membership. All right, let's see where I was. There I was. Cecil. Michael, yes, you missed the red-tailed shark. Can a hang on the back and an air stone be okay with 4 goldfish? I would think so. Remember, with goldfish, you don't want a lot of water flow. So the air stone will be good for the gas exchange without a lot of water flow. Red Ed. Dan is me, and I don't know why you haven't found me before. YouTube hides me. $3.10, hello. All right, I'm all caught up. So let me do some smoking and puffing here for a minute. All right, somebody could stop sign me if you would. So the fact that, you know, when I found my wife's tank this morning with the bone dry filter not working, it didn't really make me smile, just because I know what I'm doing. It wasn't like some big fucking like, yes, it worked kind of moment or anything like that, which kind of brings me to my next point of, like, once you become a fish keeper of a certain level, you can fall into what I'm going to call the father fish trap. And I want to be careful that I don't do that here on my channel when I talk to people. And so I wanted to talk about the filterless tank and why it didn't surprise me that all the fish in my wife's tank were just perfectly fine without a filter running. A lot of people have tanks set up that if their filter's shut off for 2 or 3 days, they'd have real issues in their tank, whereas I don't. This tank, I've forgotten to turn the filter back on plenty of times. Every tank I've got, at some point, my filters have either shut down or I forgot to plug them back in after a water change or something. And it was days later. And in one case with my puffer tank, when I used to have Butterbean my puffer, it was literally 3 months that the filter wasn't running, and the tank, I didn't know it. I got the canister filter on the bottom, and I just opened the valve to stop the water flow, but you left it plugged in and running. It doesn't hurt the filter at all. It just stops the water flow, and that way you don't have to unplug it and disconnect it and have the air bubbles get in it and all that kind of stuff. And so I did that. I did the water change, and then I forgot to push the thing back down to get the water flowing again. So the filter was humming along nicely for months until I finally realized when I did the next water change that the filter wasn't on. And I was like, holy shit. And so I had done a filter change at that point on my previous one. And when I opened it up, because after 3 months, I wasn't going to just let that shit start flowing back into the tank again. We needed to redo that filter. And when I pulled it off and opened it up, it was clean inside. Like, I had done a filter change, put it back on, and then never opened it up. It was just the water I had put in there from the previous filter change. I still changed it all out and did another filter change anyway, just to be on the safe side. But for months, that tank sat there with no filter on it, just an air stone. and it was fine. I didn't even know there was anything wrong with it until I physically noticed that the filter wasn't running. So if you set your tanks up right, you don't need to have them filtered per se. You know, the again, we'll get into it. Let me do some weed here, and then we'll talk about it. It can kind of get complicated when you just the word filter in an aquarium can mean a lot of things. What are you filtering? What kind of filter? You know, is it a mechanical filter? You're talking about chemical filtration, you're talking about biological filtration. There's a lot of things that qualify as a filter on an aquarium. And so saying a filterless aquarium is kind of a misnomer. But if we're going to take it at face value of it doesn't have a mechanical filter on it, then I have to say a tank that simply has an air stone in it is a filterless tank. An air stone doesn't count as a filter if that's your definition of a filterless tank, is one that doesn't have a mechanical filter on it, because an air stone is not a filter. It kind of is because of what it does, but it's not in the technical sense. And so just because I had the air stone running in that tank for 3 months, I didn't have a filter in that tank for 3 months. And so that's been the case on a lot of my tanks. Over the years, I've got almost all my tanks now have air stones in them. I used to really, really hate air stones, but I've come to just fully appreciate the value of an air stone. You know how like something like drinking more water is the simplest, easiest thing you can do to improve your health? Putting an air stone in your aquarium is the simple, easiest thing you can possibly do to improve the health of your aquarium. If you're having any kind of issue whatsoever, too much algae, dead spots, too much grunge building up on the bottom, try putting an air stone in your tank and see if it doesn't make your tank function better. It will. So I've come to appreciate them. I still don't like the look. I don't like the bubbles in the tank and all that kind of stuff. But when I see them and I know what they're doing and everything, I'm happy that they're there, and so it doesn't bother me. Kind of like I always say about like the taste of mushrooms. They taste terrible, but I don't mind that taste because I know what that taste means is coming, you know? And the air stones are the same way. I still don't like the air stones, but I kind of like the air stones because when I see them, I know it means my tank is going to be a hell of a lot healthier, and so it just makes me feel better knowing they're in there. All right, I think I cleared that out in one. Sure did. All right. Let's see. Thank you again, Dave. All right, Mike, I will see you tomorrow. Thank you there, Shirley. Janice, got all kind of stop signs here. Yeah, power head will help too. The power head can definitely keep the water circulating around the tank, which is the most important thing. But the air stone will do both. The air stone will give you that water movement, that water circulation, but it'll also give you mad gas exchange that you won't get from just the physical circulation that you would get from a power head. I honestly don't think there's any real way to tell the males from the females with the diamond tetras. Green tea, hello. I believe they are, is it Wendetti or what? I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but you probably know what I'm talking about. I think that's what that is Wendetti. I've also got my 55 over there is just chock full of them. This one here. I actually got in there and cleaned that out recently. It was so full that you couldn't see the water anymore. It was like a block of crypts. And I got in there, like the fish hardly had any place to swim. So I got in there and cleaned a whole bunch of it out. And it's really almost filled halfway back in again. So it's not going to be long before I got to get in there and clear that out again. Do air pumps work on high or warmer water? I'm assuming you mean like a higher temperature or warmer temperature. When you have a warmer temperature, an air stone is mandatory. The warmer the water is, the less oxygen it's capable of holding. Cold water holds a lot of oxygen. Warmer water holds less oxygen. And once you get up until mid 80s, about 83 to 85 degrees, your water is really having a hard time holding any oxygen for any length of time. It really wants to off gas the oxygen. I always recommend people, if you're running a tank over 83 degrees, an air stone is a must. It's very warm water like that holds very little oxygen. So again, the more you facilitate gas exchange, the more that tank will have readily available oxygen to it. So as it's off gassing, fresh oxygen will be able to come in. Any tank over 83 degrees must have an air stone to be a good functioning, healthy tank. Remember, everybody, you don't need oxygen in your tank just for your fish to breathe. That's a common misunderstanding in aquariums. You're not just putting oxygen in the tank for your fish to breathe. Your nitrogen cycle, that's not a, everybody says, oh, the ammonia gets eaten by a bacteria and that converts it into nitrite. It doesn't get eaten, it gets oxidized. The nitrite gets oxidized into nitrate. And so that requires oxygen. It's pulling oxygen out of your water to break that ammonia down. All the moam and the decomposition, all the stuff that's breaking down and turning into harmless waste products, it's becoming harmless waste products because it's being oxidized down. And the more waste products you have, the heavier stocking load you have, the more bioload and the more food that goes into the tank, the more oxygen that tank is going to use to deal with all that excessive waste. And so having an air stone in there allows the tank to have ample oxygen for all of the processes that are taking place. It's not just there so that the fish can breathe, it's there so that the tank can function. So oxygen is paramount to a healthy tank. You have to have a fully oxygenated tank in order for it to function properly, in order for the waste to break down and not to turn into like muck and sludge. If you ever get gunky shit in your tank, muck, sludge, stuff like that, that's not enough oxygen to properly break the stuff down. The process is going too slow. It's rotting as it starts to break down. It's not just decomposing like it should. Oxygen is paramount to a healthy tank. You can have it over 86 degrees, but for one, I don't know why you'd want it over 86 degrees. And two, you're going to be really limited on fish that are going to stay healthy in water that warm for any kind of length of time. That's really warm water. I mean, even most tropical fish, 83, 85 degrees is kind of the upper end of where most tropical fish like to be. Most tropical fish are comfortable between 76 and 79 degrees, anywhere in that 75 to 80 area. Tropical fish are fine. So there's unless you live somewhere that's just really warm and your tanks are just room temperature, out in your garage at 90 degrees or something. But that's a really, really high temperature to run your tank. The only time I know people that do that are the discus keeper people that are trying to get their biggest discus because they got discus, complex, big discus complex. So they run their tanks really stupidly high. And if you're trying to kill ick or some other parasite using heat, you may run a tank that high. Otherwise, I don't really know why you'd want to run a tank over 86 degrees, but definitely put an air stone in it if you do. All right, let's see. Getting a lot of good questions tonight. No, definitely I don't smoke cigarettes. Well, we're going to do a dab here in a minute. So if a bong gets me a subscribe, maybe a dab will get me a super chat or super thanks. My biggest tank is technically my 125, and then I've got my other 125 Daryl down there. I don't know if you get the joke with the Daryl and Daryl or not. If you're not, then you're probably not as old as I am. So this is my other 125 Daryl. And then this pond right here that we were just looking at a little while ago, this nominally, if I filled it all the way up to the edge, would be 218 gallons. And so I just call it about a 200-gallon pond. So that would be my biggest fish containment unit. I always call it a tank, but I guess technically in a way it's a tank. But my pond is my biggest fish containment unit. It's about 200 gallons. Oh, not drinking for a while will do wonders for your digestion. No, Dave, if you just put an air stone in your tank without the sponge filter, it won't work the same way. The way that works is the air stone is inside the sponge, and as the bubbles rise up, it pulls water with it, and that forces water to pull through the sponge, and that's where you're getting your filtration. The air stone is good, but the air stone's not where you're doing the actual filtration. My thoughts on a crayfish tank, and hello, Cassidy, by the way. Crayfish are awesome. If you can do one, I highly recommend it. They're fascinating animals. I really, really loved the crayfish when I had them. They're opportunistic, though. They may catch the occasional fish if you have fish in the tank with them. And they are escape artists that are a lot stronger than you think. So you've got to put them in a very secure tank. And if you do, and the lid's no way for them to lift it up and crawl out or climb up anything and get out, then you're good to go. I highly recommend. Give them lots of caves and some, fairly deep substrate. They like to dig. They'll burrow. They'll tunnel. They're little construction workers. They're just in there constantly moving rocks around, looking for food. They'll pick sticks up and move sticks out of the way to see if anything's under them. Fascinating little animals. So I highly recommend the crayfish tank. I just don't really have the appropriate tank to keep one, or I'd still have some. I do have some crayfish from back in the day. Actually, I got a picture on my phone from it. Popped up. Google sends you like old memory photos. Really good photo of one of my old crayfish came up. So let me see if I can find that in a minute. Oh, let's see. No, you don't really need a lot of plants to go filterless. I don't think so anyway. Well, the plastic plants versus live plants argument is a matter of a personal choice as far as I'm concerned. I personally don't have any problem with plastic plants if that's what you like in your tank. I prefer the planted because just of the naturalness of them. They are part of the ecosystem. They're not just decorations in the tank. Like the rocks are decorations in the tank, and in a way they function as part of the ecosystem because the biofilm and the cultures and everything, the bacteria that you need living in the tank lives on surface area, and lots of rocks and stuff will provide that. But they're just providing surface area. The plastic plants will do that also. Live plants are actively pulling nutrients out, producing oxygen, providing food, providing habitat. It also provides surface area that bacteria can grow on. There's a lot of benefits to having live plants, but it's also, having a plastic plant on the shelf is a lot easier than having a house plant on the shelf. So, and aquarium plants can be more challenging sometimes than house plants. So that's, again, it's just sort of a matter of personal choice. There's pros and cons to each one of them. Rosie. No, I don't really name my fish. I got a few fish that have names, but just kind of, they're either special fish or they're just goofy names that I named them, during a live stream once and the name just stuck or something like that. But I don't really bother naming my fish. Excuse me. I wouldn't put tape on it because, when you need to take the lid off, taking the tape off kind of sucks. Just something heavy. If you've got a piece of slate, it'll be nice and low. It'll look nice if you lay it across the top. You can use bricks, a big heavy book. But but heavy. It's got to be something serious. I'm telling you, you have no idea how strong a crayfish is when it gets into the corner where the glass and it starts pushing. It will push its way up through that glass and get out unless you've got a significant amount of weight above it. They are absolute escape artists. Now, keep in mind, if you've got a tank and the only way for them to get to the surface is to climb up the cord for where your air pump is or something like that, that one corner is the only corner you really need to worry about. But once they get to one corner, they can crawl along on the plastic lip on the inside and get out somewhere else. So don't fall for the trick of, well, I only need to secure this one corner, because that's the only place they can climb to. I've seen them, get their claws up in there and crawl along the edge. Because I used to just put a piece to block that corner, and the rest of the tank was open, and they just crawl along the edge so they got to the open part and climb out. Crayfish naturally leave the water at night. If you go down to a stream or a pond or something that has crayfish in it, you go down there early in the morning, late in the evening, or if you're out at night, you'll often see crayfish rummaging around in the wet grass and the leaf litter and stuff on the side of the water. They come out of the water all the time. It's a normal, natural thing for them to do. As long as they don't dry out, they're fine. And so getting out of your tank is natural behavior for them. It's not like they're unhappy or your tank conditions aren't right or anything. That's natural behavior for them. They go out at night. So remember, and they're strong as shit. Just keep that in mind. How do you breed guppies? Put 2 of them in a tank. Oh, a red swamp crayfish. That sounds cool. You can get 2 if you want, but it's usually cruel to the female, because the male will just act like a male and has one thing on its mind and will literally harass the female to death. It's generally recommended 2 females for every 1 male. So if you got 2 males, get 4 females. But generally, you put a couple of males and females together in a tank and you'll have guppies for life. And you don't have to play any Barry White. You don't have to play any Marvin Gaye. You don't need any low lighting or scented candles. Just put them in a tank and walk away, and you'll have guppies for life. My mushroom, I've started the fruiting process, but I haven't yet actually seen the fruits developing. We're 5 days in, but I have begun the process now. No, I don't have any baby angelfish. Oh, you're quite welcome. Here, let me grab my phone real quick, and I'll see if I can find that picture of the crayfish on there. Mine is the species around here. I never realized this until a few years ago, but I've never seen other crayfish than the crayfish we have around here. Like, maybe I have and just didn't notice, but the virile crayfish is the one that I think of as the crayfish that lives around here. And yet that's not a native crayfish. I've never seen one of the crayfish that's supposedly native around here, unless, again, I've seen them and just didn't notice the difference or whatever. But the virile crayfish is pretty distinct. It's kind of gray, but has purple claws, and it's a really cool looking fish. Oh, I forgot my music. I still got my music up here. Does anybody want to try to guess what music I was listening to tonight? Normally, I listen to German bands. You all know I like my electronic music. I'll give you that hint. And most of my electronic music is German bands, oddly enough, despite names like the Bahama Soul Club. Well, they're not really an electronic band. But anyway, tonight I was listening to one of the 2 French bands I listen to. And again, band is kind of stretching the word a little bit. It's usually like a person or 2 and a sound engineer, and they, maybe they have guest musicians come in or whatever, but it's a couple of people, and that's kind of the thing. So the first French band that I listen to regularly is Daft Punk. So I'll give you that one. Who is the other French band that I listen to fairly regularly that I was listening to tonight? Oh, I could show you a picture of my abs too, but then you'd also have to see me in my underwear. All right, that crayfish, it's actually probably back here a ways. I don't even remember the last time I looked at that. Should be pretty easy to spot though once I get there. Oh God, how many months ago was that? I think I posted it on Discord, actually. All right, I'm not going to scroll too much longer here, but it should pop out immediately as soon as I scroll past it. I shouldn't have to look closely. It wasn't that long ago. At least I think it wasn't that long ago, but you know how my brain is when it comes to time or the illusion of time. That's my cat, little Omen. Meow. Oh, Jesus, how far back am I going here? Well, I don't think it's this far back. You look at my gallery. That's probably even worse. Oh, well. You can probably find it on Discord if you're a channel member. Could have sworn I posted that to Discord, so it should be right here in my gallery somewhere. I am not seeing it. I can't believe all the stupid pictures I take. I don't know if Zini's still awake or not, but Zini knows about all the stupid pictures I take because I send most of them to him. All right, I am going to call it good because I'm back to seeing all the pictures I was seeing. Oh, I'm at the bottom, so, oh well, I tried. I thought I had a good picture of my crayfish in there somewhere, and I probably do, but I'm not going to spend the rest of the live stream scrolling through my damn photos looking for it. Anyway, any guesses on the music? I will even go so far as to tell you the name of the album I was listening to. It's a Roman numeral. It's MCMCX, which should be 1990 if you translated it. Yeah, 1990. So MCMCX is the name of the album I was listening to tonight. Do you know who that's by? Let's see. What are my thoughts on a paludarium setup? Well, I would definitely not recommend them in a paludarium setup. Hey, Kenfolk. If you only found one, then there probably were more that got eaten. Crayfish don't really breathe air, but they have gills like the way a crab does. They can move air in and out like through bubbles, and they keep them in their gills that are wet. They're you ever seen a crab's gills? They look more like weird pseudo lungs than actual gills. Crayfish are similar to that, and as long as they're wet and you know they can have the water to they bubble water out like into a foam and gas exchange happens, and then they suck the water back in, move it through their gills, and then they foam it back out, and they are able to gas exchange that way. So they're still using water, but it's still sort of tidal breathing as you and I think of breathing. They do push water out to exchange the gases, and then they move it back in where they get the gas exchange, you know, in their gills. And then once it's all loaded up with the carbon dioxide, they bubble it up again. The carbon dioxide goes out, more oxygen comes in. They take the water back in, etc. Isn't nature awesome? As far as a paludarium, like I said, no, they'll climb a paludarium or whatever. If you could set it up in a way that the bottom tank where the water fell was completely detached and it was a straight up waterfall. Usually paludariums are sort of like a open tank with it just sort of going up in the back. They'll climb right up that back. They could probably climb a tree if they wanted. Well, if you fill it halfway, that's fine. But if you've got a power cord going into the tank or anything like that, again, they will climb out. But if you've got a tank, you could have it 3 inches from the surface, as long as it's, as long as there's nothing that will connect them to the surface, as long as they're completely isolated from the surface, then that's fine. You don't have to even cover the tank. But if you've got anything going into the tank that's got a power cord on it, you got access to get out of the tank. They are escape artists. So again, if you've got a completely isolated water surface from the top of the tank, that's fine. They can't jump, but they will climb anything. If you've got a stick that's leaning against, then they'll climb up the stick and stand on their little hind legs and climb out. They are escape artists. Let's see. Taylor Swift. I was going to say, what, Taylor Swift? What? No, I'm definitely not listening to Taylor Swift. Had away with his love. No. Yeah, I do. I got my 20 long in my office, and I have the 20 gallon in my wife's room. Morning. I'm getting delay even on my monitor, so I'm sure there's going to be some lag time in the live feed. All right. Rammstein. No, I get asked about Rammstein a lot. I'm not sure why I get asked about Rammstein a lot. Oh, I always say I listen to a lot of German bands. I guess that's why I get asked about Rammstein. No, I listen to German bands, but very, very different type of German band than Rammstein. That's not my kind of music. The band I was listening to tonight is called Enigma, and it's actually just one dude, and he goes by Enigma, and he has different people perform with him, and he's like a sound engineer, DJ guy. I think he still does music. I don't know. Computer, is Enigma still a band?
As far as I know, Enigma has not disbanded. The group was founded in 1990 and has been together for 35 years.
There you go. Oh, you know what? I bet 1990, MCMCX, I bet that's their debut album. Let me go double check and see if that's the case. Computer, is MCMCX Enigma's debut album?
From Genius.com. MCMXCAD is the first album by Enigma, a group then consisting of Michael Kretzu, Frank Peterson, Fabrice Catod, and Sandra Kretzu.
All right, it's 4 of those bastards. Thought it was one dude. Apparently it's 4 people. AC/DC's all right. AC/DC's good driving music. No, I haven't had an Opaline. Rammstein's not a German band? You go ask the computer again. Computer, is Rammstein a German band?
Here is an answer from an Alexa Answers contributor that I translated. Rammstein are a German industrial metal band formed in Berlin in 1993 belonging to the Neue Deutsche Hart movement.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Rammstein's not a German band, I don't know what is. Of course, like I said, I got a German band that I listen to, and they call themselves the Bahama Soul Club. So I guess just because their name is Rammstein doesn't necessarily mean they're German. But I hear somebody say Rammstein, that's as German as you can German. The goldfish are still doing well, and I will get a bigger tank for them just as soon as somebody buys me one, or I can afford it, whichever comes first. So it's probably going to be a long time from now, because I'm not expecting anybody to buy me one, and I ain't going to be able to afford one for a while, but we'll see what we can do. This is just nicotine. All right, filterless aquariums is what I want to talk about next. But actually, let's talk about falling into the father fish trap first. So what I got to thinking about while I was in the shower, pondering, I do some good thinking in the shower. I was thinking about what I was going to talk about tonight, and I was going to use, the example of my wife's tank and the filter stopping and all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking how, I can just talk about how to set up a filterless tank because it's easy to do, and just anybody can set up a filterless tank. And then I was like, oh my God, I sound like Father Fish. And that's when I realized I've been keeping fish long enough now, and I'm going to toot my own horn for a while. There is no false modesty with me, so if I sound like I got a huge ego, that's fine. I do. I'm good at keeping fish. I'm knowledgeable about keeping fish. I've done so much research and personal actual research, like testing stuff and doing experiments with things, and I've read more shit about water chemistry than I ever need to know in 2 lifetimes, and so on and so forth over the years. I can set up an aquarium with my eyes closed that could function without a filter once it was established. It's just how I set my tanks up. I don't even think about it. And it's a process I developed over years of experimenting. And I don't necessarily mean experimenting in the let's try this and see what happens kind of way and compare it to, a control sort of thing. But I had tanks that, over the years, they weren't functioning well. And then I added the airstone, for example. And hey, I noticed that the airstone started working better. So I learned and I gained knowledge about, setting a tank up this way makes it difficult to clean, or setting a tank up this way makes it for difficulty in getting the water to circulate properly and whatnot. And so now, like that, I don't even think about that kind of stuff when I'm putting a tank together because I've just got so much experience doing it. And I found myself in that moment while I was thinking in the shower about just set up a fucking filterless tank. It's easy. And that's the exact same way Father Fish talks about setting up his tanks. He talks about that as though, oh, today's your first day keeping fish. Well, do this. And like, no, dude, chill out. Like, you can't go from 0 to highly sophisticated, self-sustaining tank in one leap. You got to crawl before you can walk. And so you need to learn fish keeping and build the knowledge and the skill and so on and so forth to do that. And that to me was what I was thinking of as the Father Fish trap, of just taking for granted the fact that this stuff's in my brain like breathing is. And so just spit it out there to people as though they know it, as though it's as simple as breathing to them. I'm sure if you ask Tony Hawk if skateboarding is difficult, he'd say, no, it's easy. Anybody can skateboard. Yes, as the guy that skateboards more gracefully than most of us can walk, to him, it probably is. And it's not to say that you couldn't learn to skateboard, but you ain't going to just start out Tony Hawking it. You're going to have a few broken wrists and shit along the way. And with the fish keeping, it's kind of the same way. So that's what made me want to sort of back off. And instead of just spitting out, it's easy to do, just do it. I figured it would be better to actually have a conversation about a filterless tank and what that means and how they function and what keeps them alive and why you can, why doesn't every tank need a filter? Why do some tanks need filters and others don't? These are kind of questions that somebody that's not well versed in fish keeping wouldn't know. Just, I see that guy does a filterless tank, and then they just take the filter off their tank, assuming they can do so too, because I did. That's not necessarily true. How is that tank set up? That's going to make the difference of whether it'll work in that tank or not. I have some tanks that I wouldn't take the filter off of. They'd probably be okay for a day or two, but I don't think they'd go well without a filter on them for a while. My 29 doesn't even have an airstone in it. That's one of my OG tanks. And I've thought about putting an airstone in that tank so many times over the years. And I always say, you know what? That tank ticks over like a clock. I've had the least problems with that tank out of every other tank I've got. I'm not fucking with it. It's working perfectly. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And maybe as time goes on and the fish that are in there die off and I kind of revamp the tank or something, maybe we can readdress that and I can think about that in the future. But for now, I'm just leaving that tank the way it is because it's working fine. Let's see. Every other tank in here has an airstone in it, with the exception of my little tiny 5-gallon shrimp tank. That doesn't really need an air stone in it. Although it is cloudy and the water never really clears up. Maybe I could put a little tiny sponge filter in there or something and put an air stone on it, and maybe it would function a little bit better. Oh, thank you, Dave. Look on Facebook Marketplace. I don't even have Facebook. I think I don't know. I might have Facebook. I'm not keen on used tanks. Good night, Michael, if you're still there. Detritus worms are your friend. True Heart, hello. All right, you can stop signing me again. Well, that, your complaints about Father Fish is kind of exactly what I'm talking about. He says that kind of stuff in a way that, like, this is just how you should keep fish. And not everybody necessarily wants to keep fish like that. Not everybody wants a tank that looks like that. Not everybody wants a tank that is planted like that and has all that maintenance requirement, or obviously the idea is once you get it set up, it's maintenance free, which we won't talk about that. But not everybody wants that. Some people like a more austere tank with less stuff in it. As Janice pointed out, I myself agree 100%. I like a tank that's chock full of fish. I like a tank that you can't put another fish in there with a crowbar and a stick of butter. You can't do that and have the Father Fish method. His method relies on a very low stocking density, a very low feeding regimen, if at all. It's, again, I don't even understand the point of setting up a fish tank that you can just treat like it's a living painting on your wall that you just look at. It alleviates the point for me. The whole point of having a hobby is having something to do. And if you set your tank up so that you never have to do anything to it, it's not a hobby anymore. It's a decoration. It's something you look at. It's like calling your television a hobby. And I'm sorry to say, as much as you might like to think it is, watching television is not a hobby. It's an activity, but it's not a hobby. And fish keeping is a hobby. And a hobby is an activity that gives you enough challenge mentally that it's engaging, but it's not so challenging that it's frustrating. That's a good hobby. Fish keeping is a great hobby for somebody like that. It gives you something to do with your tank and maintenance and water changing, feeding the fish, trimming your little plants or whatever you're doing. Doesn't necessarily require a lot of work or a lot of time, but it's a thing to do. You can take your hour on Saturday evening and decompress while you tinker with your fish tank or whatever. The same way you would take an hour on a Friday night to sit down and work on your models or build your puzzles or whatever other hobby you might engage in. It's not a job. It's not a daily activity that you have to do all day, every day. It's a hobby, but a hobby is an activity. It's a thing you do. And setting up a tank that requires you to not do anything just seems to be like shooting yourself in the foot. You're taking your own hobby away from yourself. It's an impressive accomplishment. It is a very sophisticated system to set up and to get it running properly. Again, it's impressive, but it's just not what I'm interested in doing. And so to treat that kind of tank like this is the way you're supposed to keep fish, that's a different thing. That's a Father Fish personality thing. When I talked about the Father Fish trap, I just simply meant just getting so knowledgeable about something that you just assume everybody else is on your level to some degree, that you don't have to, slow things down and kind of explain things in simpler terms and work your way up from there. He just starts from sophistication. And like, that's the Father Fish trap I was talking about. All the other stuff is just his own personality traits or whatever. And we've discussed them enough times on this channel for some reason over the years anyway. So that's not my issue with him, although it is an issue with him. But my concern tonight was simply about just me not getting caught up in the idea of just set your tank up like this and just assuming that's an easy thing to do. So let's talk about why you can and can't run filterless tanks and all that kind of stuff. Laura said she's watching the foosball game and she has a million other things to do, but is going to try to be lurking. So she's around somewhere. Let me see. I'm just reading comments. I don't necessarily have to respond to everything. I grew up around Baltimore. I have that Baltimore Philly accent, although I have worked to not have quite so much Baltimore accent. I was actually thinking about that the other day, my Baltimore accent. Hey, Kevin. They shed based on how fast they grow. So if you got them in a warmer environment, you're feeding them a lot, they're going to tend to grow faster. You might get a couple sheds a year out of them when they're younger, but the bigger they get, the slower they grow. So you get consecutively less and less sheds as they mature. But young crayfish, growing fast in a nice warm tank, you might get 2 or 3 a year out of them. If someone could stop sign me. I was thinking the other day about the way I pronounce the word iron, and I say iron instead of iron. Just saying iron sounds weird. I just say iron. But if I'm talking about the hot thing that you press your clothes with, and I'm talking about the activity, I say it's ironing. I do say ironing. But if I'm just talking about the thing, I call it an iron. And so I do pronounce it correctly, sort of one way. But then I got to thinking about my mom, and my mom says iron. It's iron, or it's ironing. It's iron. And that's a very Baltimore way of pronouncing the word iron. And although nobody really says iron, but iron, IERN is iron is how we pronounce it in Baltimore. But my mom will also say ironing. She's ironing her clothes, and so I've gotten some of the Baltimore-ness out of me, but not all of it. All right, so why do we put a filter on our aquarium in the first place? The reason we put filters on our aquarium is because it's a really simple way of accomplishing multiple things at the same time. You're accomplishing 3 basic things with your hang on the back or your canister filter. Either or doesn't matter. Mechanical filter, doesn't matter the brand, style, whatever. The mechanical filter provides 3 things for your tank. It provides, most importantly, water circulation, water flow. It's moving water around your tank. That's the key function of your filter, believe it or not. Or it's the most important function of your filter, I should say. The purpose of the filter generally, however, is to mechanically filter your water, meaning that it will take physical debris and remove it from your site. It's not removing it from the tank. It's removing it from your site. It's the equivalent of sweeping dirt under the carpet. The dirt's still in the room with you. It's just where you can't see it. So when you got that crud that's in your filter, it may not be swirling around in your tank, but your tank water is flowing through that stuff in your filter. And so all that stuff is still in your tank. It's just being collected in a nice handy dandy central location that you can just whip the filter pad out, put a fresh one in, and begin collecting the stuff up again. But that's the only thing it's really doing. It's just giving you a nice easy way to get excess detritus and stuff like that out of the tank as it picks it up out of the water column. It's not removing it from the tank. So keep that in mind. Set that on the shelf. That's all that stuff is still in your tank. It's just being held in one spot for easy removal. The next thing it does for you, the third thing it does for you, and I'll even give you a 4th one on it. The third one it does for you is it provides you with a place to put a sponge or some sort of biomaterial. By biomaterial, I mean anything that gives you a lot of surface area. You can use pot scrubbies, ceramic rings, plastic beads, anything that's going to give you a lot of surface area. The hang on the backs have those little black sponges in them. That surface area provides you with a place for the necessary bacteria and whatnot that needs to grow in the tank to live. So if your tank is set up where it's austere as can be, it's a bare glass tank with some fish swimming around in it, you still have a place where that culture and that bacteria can live in your filter. The fourth thing I'll say is that the filter provides space for you to add additional things to the tank, like chemical filtration in the form of carbon, or if you want to reintroduce some mineralization to it, you can put the minerals in your tank, in your filter rather than in the tank. And as the water flows through the filter, it'll carry that dissolved minerals back into the tank. And so it does provide that little handy dandy bonus that you can use it as a way to slowly feed stuff into the tank to alter your water chemistry or whatever. So those are the main thing a filter does. So mechanical filtration, you don't need it. I just explained how all that stuff that's in your filter pad, it's still in your tank. It's just being collected up in one spot for easy removal. Doesn't have to be collected up in one spot for easy removal. It can be all down on the bottom of the tank in the form of mulm, or even swirling around in the water column if you don't mind, looking like a river or a pond that's got stuff in the water or whatever. Fundamentally, it's not changing anything in the tank by that mechanical filtration. It just makes the tank look prettier. It's tidy. It's sweeping the dirt under the carpet so you don't see it anymore. That's all that's doing. So the mechanical filtration is not necessary. Biological filtration, if you've got surface area in the tank galore, as I do, with all the rocks and the woodwork and the plants and the substrate that allows water to flow through it, I've got more surface area than I would need 10 times over for proper filtration, biological filtration in this tank. Do I need plastic beads in my filter? Not at all. I've got all the biological filtration I need right here. So we don't need mechanical filtration. If your tank is set up like this or similar, you don't need the biological filtration. And the third function that your filter does, which again is the most important function of the filter, is circulating the water, which allows for gas exchange. If you've got an air stone in the tank, you don't need that mechanical filter to circulate the water. If you've got power heads in your tank that are moving the water around the tank, you don't need that mechanical filter to circulate the water. You do need the water to circulate. You just don't need a mechanical filter necessarily to circulate it. You can use a power head and air stone and that sort of thing. So why do I need a filter on my tank? And the reason I have a filter on most of my tanks is for the convenience of collecting the stuff up and being able to do filter changes nice and easy, keeping the tanks looking pretty, etc. But if I forget to turn one back on, I've got power heads, I've got air stones, and I've got biological filtration galore. I don't need that mechanical filtration on the tank. All it means is I will get more mulm building up, more crud, detritus will build up in the corners, and I would just have to be a little more on top of how often I would vac some of that stuff out of there just to keep the tank from getting overwhelmed with waste material. I still do water changes from time to time. They're not, I won't say they're not necessary. I'm not a real believer in the never do water changes mentality. I know a lot of people talk a big game about that stuff, but I've heard 1,000 people tell me that while Father Fish always talks about never doing water changes, he does water changes on his tanks. And so I don't think you need to do lots of water changes. And in fact, I tend to think less is more. The less you fuck with your tank, the better it's healthier it's going to be and the more it'll function. But I do water changes on my tanks. My 29 might get 1 or 2 a year, but I do water changes on it. I do filter maintenance on. Well, I don't really do filter maintenance on that tank. Here, let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. I got 2 tanks I can use as an example. So my 29, I haven't changed these filter pads out in God knows how long. So when you look at it, you see the water is not flowing really through the filters at all. What little water is coming out this chute is going over the top. This side is likewise. It's going over the top. Nothing is flowing through that filter. Nothing is flowing through that black sponge. But we got lots of water flow flowing back into the tank. So functionally, I know technically this tank has a filter on it because there's the filter right there. But functionally, This is a sophisticated power head. That's all that's doing. It's just moving water around the tank. It's not doing any biological filtration, because if the water's not moving through those sponges, it's not biological. It's not doing shit. Those sponges may as well be bricks in there. And the filters, likewise, if the water's not flowing through the filter, it's not going to collect any stuff. The stuff just flows, it gets sucked up into the filter, but it just flows right back out into the tank. So I genuinely cannot tell you the last time I did a water change or filter change on this tank. I've done a couple water changes on it, but I seldom even mess with the filter. I just don't fucking care. It's like, I don't know, why bother? In fact, you can even see there's a piece of Java moss growing on the inside of the filter chute right there. And then if we come down here and we look at my fancy goldfish tank, you will see that this is more or less the exact same situation. It's been more recent since I've changed the filters out in this tank, but it has obviously also been a very, very long time since I have actually done any real filter maintenance on this. There's no water flowing through that at all. And then likewise, it's just flowing right over the top. And that's not really even moving any water at all through it. And then most of it's just flowing back down into the middle. Now in this tank, I was getting some cloudiness because there's a really big bio load, and you can see this is one of my more austere tanks. I don't have a lot of stuff in it, and I was getting some cloudy water. So I did put a small sponge filter, which looks like it needs to be cleaned out too. It's barely spitting the water out anymore. So I'm going to need to get in there and squeeze that sponge filter out. So this tank could probably use a little bit of maintenance. But again, when it comes to the filtration, it's not terribly difficult to set up a tank that doesn't necessarily require, a full complement of filtration the way so many people seem to think you need. The key, however, is understanding what's happening in your tank, understanding what functions the filter serves, and making sure all of those functions are otherwise taken care of. Again, if you've got a power head moving your water around, you don't need the filter moving the water around. If you've got something else doing the biological filtration, you don't need the filter to do the biological filtration, etc. So there's a lot of ways you could set a tank up. It doesn't have to be heavily planted, but it does have to have a lot of stuff in it. You would need some good substrate. You'd need a lot of rocks and stuff for the water to move around in. You'd need plenty of water circulation, but you could set a tank up theoretically with enough surface area in it that even without any real plants at all, provided you've got the proper circulation, etc., you could still do it. It's not the plants that are providing the oxygen, it's the water circulation. And of course, if you've got an air stone in there, again, tonight's an air stone theme. I can't say enough about putting an air stone in the tank. With an air stone, you practically don't even need the power head. The air stone can almost function both as your gas exchange and your water circulation. So what I was talking about earlier is when I said the idea of filtration being a sort of a loaded word. Like, what is a filter in a tank? What is a biological filter? First of all, let's define filter. A filter is something that removes one thing from another. You pass something through it and it removes something from it on the way through. So your biological filter is removing ammonia through a chemical process. So it is a filter, but when someone says filter, they think of a mechanical thing like an air filter or, something like that. That's not necessarily what the word filter means. So this may be it's not, but let's say for a moment, this is my filterless tank. It may be a filterless tank in the sense of it doesn't have a mechanical filter on it, but that doesn't make it an unfiltered tank. There's still filtration going on in here. All my biological filtration is still happening. And with the air stone, I vaguely alluded to the idea that you could almost call an air stone a type of filter. An air stone is providing the ability to remove excess CO2 from the tank. And even though you're not really passing something through another thing, that's why I didn't really get, call it a filter. It's not exactly, but it's still in that neighborhood of how filtration works. It doesn't have to be this mechanical thing that physically separates something from something else. There's chemical processes that happen that also remove stuff from other stuff. Again, you've got a chemical process or a biological process that's a sort of biochemical that's happening when you're getting your biological filtration. That ammonia that's being oxidized, that oxidation is a chemical reaction. It's happening through biological processes, but it's a chemical reaction that's happening. That chemical reaction is filtering the ammonia out of your tank. So again, understanding all of how it works is where you need to start for me. There are other people that you can say do X, Y, and Z, and that's all they need to know. They go do it and everything's successful. I need to know why I'm doing X, what does Z do, and how does that affect, like I need to understand what's happening and then I can do it. When I learned to drive and someone was teaching me how to drive the manual transmission, I had 3 different people try to teach me how to drive a manual transmission, and they were just trying to tell me what to do. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was doing the thing they were telling me to do, but I didn't know what it was. Why am I pushing this pedal? What happens when I push that pedal? Why do I move it in this gear or that gear? So finally, a friend of mine sat me down. He said, I'll teach you how to drive a manual transmission. He said, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to explain to you how a manual transmission works and teach you what a clutch is and how a clutch works. And we spent about an hour discussing how it all worked. And an hour later, I was driving a manual transmission because I knew what I was doing. I understood what was happening when I was letting that pedal out. I knew why I needed to let it out slowly. I knew what I was expecting to feel. I knew why the gears went together the way they did. I understood the speed versus the gear. I knew all that going into it. And so I was able to do it. And that's just the way I do things. So for me, having the knowledge foundation of what filtration is, why we need it, how it impacts our tank, all that stuff comes first. Then you can start putting that knowledge to practical use. And even if you've got the knowledge, you're still going to make mistakes. There's still going to be a learning curve. Et cetera. I've been doing this for like 15 years and I've been doing it hard for like 15 years. Well, maybe not the last few, but I didn't just start out as the casual fish keeper with a small tank for several years. I went right into like, let's fucking do fish. And so I got a lot of experience in 15 years. And again, I didn't have somebody explaining all this to me the way I'm explaining it to you, but I read, I learned, I picked up things. I saw what happened in tanks when I did this versus that. And so now I'm to the point where I can just, again, I could set a tank up like this with my eyes closed. I wouldn't have to think twice about it. The decor, the scaping. I've got a particular style that's sort of my style. If you look at all of my tanks, they're all different and they look very unique to me. But to the casual observer, all my tanks look really similar. They've all got basically the same plants in them. They've all got the same types of rocks. They've all got the same kind of woodwork for the most part. And they do. But each tank still has its own personality, its own look. Your eyes are drawn to different places based on the lines that are in the tank and where the rocks are, what kind of vibe I'm going for in the tank. To me, I see vast differences in all my tanks. But I do have an overall sort of style of tank. And once you've got that established, again, I could just come down here in an afternoon and just put a tank together like this and fill it with water and put some fish in it. But I know not everybody can do that. So I don't want to get caught in that father fish trap of just assuming everybody's an excellent fish keeper like myself. All right. I think that's all I wanted to go over. Oh, we're already after 10 o'clock. Wow. All right, where was I? There's some stop signs. Let's see if we'll go from there. No, I never did a calcium supplement for the crayfish. Iron. Yeah, it's a good idea. I would certainly put some crushed coral and stuff like that in there. I never did, but that doesn't mean that's right or the best way of doing it. I'm just saying I never did, but it's certainly a good idea. They do prefer slightly harder water, but my understanding has always been that most of your shellfish, snails, crayfish, whatever, get their calcium from their diet more so than the water that they're in. We have fairly soft water around here, and I've got crayfish galore in my streams and rivers and lakes, and there's no crushed coral or limestone or anything around here. In fact, the water's probably acidic, and I got crayfish galore. So I don't think they need it necessarily, but it's not a bad idea to have some in there. I wouldn't go crazy. I don't think you want to have them in really hard water, although they're tanks. You could probably put them in any damn water. They can live in brackish water, I think. So you're probably fine with the excess calcium. Yeah, it'll definitely harden your water for the guppies. Yeah, the females will definitely need the calcium, making their babies and whatnot. Well, pH and hardness are not the same thing, Janice. Just because your pH is 6.3 doesn't mean your water is soft necessarily. It probably is, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Well, yeah, see, there you go. Exactly. If you've had experience with them doing better with the calcium in the water, I would definitely take that as the advice. I never had a crayfish for more than a few, maybe 9 months or something. They always escaped. I just gave up on keeping them. I like open top tanks. Again, I just don't have the right tank for crayfish. I tried many times because I can just go down the street and catch them by the bushel. Well, maybe not by the bushel, but by the dozen, certainly. I don't know. Now that you keep talking about them, I'm trying to think maybe I want to set myself up a little crayfish tank. They're really neat animals. They really are. I really enjoy them. If you've got low calcium, then that's definitely soft water. All right, Cassidy, you have a good night's sleep. Thanks for subscribing. If you've got a larger tank that you want to do an air stone in, you can do what I've done in here. If you look down on the far ends at how much air I've got blowing up in here. Can you see down on the bottom in the back? You see that blue bar? That's like a 7-inch bar, and I got a row of air coming up out of that. So you need a pretty good sized pump to move a lot of air like that. This air stone is one of those big round discs, and so you can see I've got a pretty wide column of bubbles going up right there, and they're fairly fine. But down here, this is more hidden, so I put the bigger one down here so you don't really see the bubbles so much. And if you'll notice, I kind of hid the bubbles behind the fern too, because as I've said many times, I don't like the look of bubbles necessarily, but they're important for the tank's health. So that would be my recommendation if you're concerned about the volume of air and the movement of water and stuff like that. Just get a bar. They make bars the length of a tank. You can get 3-foot bars and just have a wall of bubbles across the back of your tank. Again, I don't necessarily like that look, but it's a look. Some people like to just have that wall of bubbles in the back of their tank. Yeah, exactly. Just a little hang on the back is fine for a 55. It is a little cheaper, Janice. I'm always on fire. You guys just don't appreciate it. Philistines. All right, Dade. I actually looked at crushed coral on Amazon, and it was not that much more, like for the aquarium crushed coral, like for the substrate, and it was not that much more expensive than the chicken grit if you went by the pound, but they sold them in like, 20-pound bags or whatever. What I get is this stuff called, it's called oyster grit or oyster shell. But if you go on Amazon or you look, if you got a tack shop or something near you that sells, farm stuff, just poultry grit is what they typically call it. And you want to get the stuff that says for laying hens. And you can read the ingredients on it. It will say that it is crushed coral and crushed oyster shell. It's only a little bit of oyster shell. I don't recommend oyster shell for your aquarium if you're trying to harden your water or if you're trying to add calcium carbonate. Oyster shell is not a good idea. Oyster shell dissolves very, very slowly. The reason your calcium carbonate dissolves into water and breaks down is because it's usually contaminated with bits of magnesium or potassium, and those disruptions in the chemical structure allow it to break apart easier. Oyster shell is almost pure calcium carbonate, and it does not dissolve well at all. It really, really wants to hold together, and so oyster shell does not dissolve fast. It will dissolve, especially if it's in acidic water, but not nearly at the rate that the crushed coral will. Crushed coral dissolves very quickly. So kind of the reason I like this stuff is you get the faster dissolving stuff, but over time, you've got that steady dissolving of the oyster shells in there, which only comprise maybe 5 or 10% of the overall mixture. It's mostly crushed coral. If you run out of crushed coral, at the very least, what will be left over will still be oyster shell, and it will be doing something in your aquarium. It won't be doing a lot, but it'll still be in there and doing something, which is better than nothing. So this is called, again, you want to get the stuff for laying hens, poultry grit, and just read the ingredients. If it's not for laying hens, it will say that it's made out of crushed or pulverized granite. And granite's inert. It won't dissolve in your tank. It won't affect your chemistry. It won't do shit in your tank. So don't get just regular old poultry grit. If you read the bag, it'll tell you what it's made out of. Just get the stuff that says it's made out of oyster shells and calcium carbonate. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself a bag of useless fucking sand, basically made out of granite, and it won't do shit. You lose shrimp? Do they get sucked up in the filter, maybe? I don't know. But it is 20 after 10 on a Sunday night. Not that I got to get up in the morning, but probably some of you do. So I'm going to start winding down. I've gone over everything I wanted to talk about and done everything I wanted to do tonight. So if anybody has any questions or, want to get them out, now we're going to give another 10 minutes or so and then we'll be out of here. I said I would do a dab earlier, so let's go ahead and do a dab and then we'll wind her down. Let's see. I got a little bit of this stuff left. Oh, you know what else I need to do a dab? I need a torch to do a dab. I say again. All right, everybody. Cheers. I always forget after I've been hitting on my bong or something, this ain't the same. You just can't do that. All right. We'll call that Good for the night. I'm going to be working that one out of my lungs for a while. It was a doozy. Okay. All right, everybody, I'm going to go over the same old routine I go over every week. If you're not a member, and you'd like to be, if you enjoyed the show tonight, memberships are $2.99 a month, and that is for YouTube, not my trying to move the light rather than move the camera. Oh, you're quite welcome, Rosie and Janice. That's a good idea, Bob. I'd be interested to see if that happened. Or, you know, what happens once you put the airstone in there. Anyway, if you enjoyed tonight and you'd like to join and become a channel member, if you go below any of my videos, there's a little button that says join. I do have a Patreon. If you want to join Patreon, you can. I don't do anything on Patreon. That's just a way to help support the channel. But if you want to join the YouTube channel membership, there's a join button below my videos, and it's $2.99 a month. You'll get access to a third live stream. I do one Friday night and Sunday night for public consumption, and then I do Wednesday night for private members only. So if you want to sit in on that live stream, you'll have to join the membership. Again, $2.99 a month, but that will also get you access to my Discord server where you can participate in the community and post your pics, and we got all kind of stuff over in the Discord. So check that out if you're interested. I already got my tablet. Make sure I'm not missing any comments here before I sign off. All right. Looks like I'm all caught up. So, all right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed yourselves tonight. I will see you members on Wednesday, and everybody else, I will see you next Friday. Good night.